Room is open. Welcome, everybody. I can see people streaming in. Po, Nazneen, Lindy, Carla. Great to see you all. I think a lot of you have already been to some of our HR Indaba Network webinars. So please hop over to the chat and introduce yourself. Let us know what the weather is like where you are. It's always a good one, but more importantly, let us know where you work, and let's please use the chat in the course of the next hour for great questions, amazing comments, and just to make the content of this webinar even richer. When you do chat in the chat box, please set the to fields to everyone. Sometimes it's set to hosts and panelists, which and that means not everyone can see it, which would be a pity. We've got Kif in the house, which is the big boss around here at Workday, so that's we have to be on our best behavior. But really looking forward to this one. Great to see Aurelia, Nadira, Karen. Very nice to see everyone introducing themselves in the chat. Please keep it up. And then slowly but surely we'll start. Let's give people a few more minutes to get in. Well, at least one. It's 11:02. In fact, we've got so much cool content to get through. So I would say, let me stop sharing. And let's head to the official start of this webinar. So diversity, inclusion, and belonging have become cornerstones of human capital management strategies. And they're actually directly linked to a lot of other important elements of HR, employee well-being, innovation, having a diverse talent pool, and ultimately also with the bottom line in profitability. How can HR and diversity let me say that again. How can HR and diversity leaders make sure that companies' good intentions lead to lasting change? So between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock, we have three great experts shining the light on it. We've got Busisiwe Sithole, Group Head Transformation, Diversity and Inclusion at Absa. We've got Daniela Porr, EMEA, HCM and ED&I Specialist at Workday, joining us from Europe, by the way. We've got Bandile Jwili, our own solutions and consultants at Workday in South Africa. That's why I said our own. So we will look at the outcome of brand new research that Daniela has been working on, which is super exciting and some intriguing outcomes there, I think. Bandile will shine a light on South Africa, and Busisiwe will also zoom in on some very practical examples of how things have been going at Absa and which deliberate strategies have been put in place to improve. Obviously, we'll always, as always in these webinars, we'll try to get as many practical tips out of the panel as possible. So that's why we have the chat. I already said it in the beginning. Please make use of the chat. Please make sure you set the to fields to everyone so everyone can see your comments and questions. And don't be shy. We'll try to get to every question in this hour. So before I hand over to Daniela to kick things off for us, I will also put a poll on. I'm not going to read everything. You can sort of read through it, but it's really about where diversity and inclusion is in your business. And later in the presentation, we'll compare it with some other outcomes. So that'll be quite exciting. So let me press the launch button. So the poll is on for you. And with having said that, I'm going to hand over to Daniela from Workday. And Workday, by the way, if you didn't know this, it's been a massive supporter of the HR Indaba Network and CHR South Africa. So a big thanks to Workday for that and bringing all this cool content to us. And all protocols observed, I'm going over to Daniela, and we'll go off screen as she's presenting. And after that, we'll go to Bandile.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for having us and me. It's a big pleasure, and let's get started. So thank you for the introductions, Joel, and welcome everybody. As I've said in the chat with a funny typo, hello all. I'm Daniela. I'm part of the Workday solution team, and I have the pleasure and the wonderful job of being able to focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion for all of our EMEA and region. And part of that means that I get to work on product strategy and on solutions, but another part is that I actually have time to do some research and some interactions with customers and to see where we're going in the field. And we actually we're able to do that for a big research undertaking for the state of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I did that on an EMEA scale, and I have the honor today to introduce that to you. But then I'll hand over to my esteemed colleague, Bandile, who will take the local South African look at it. So that is another pleasure of my job, to be able to collaborate with colleagues everywhere. So that's enough about me. A little bit of structure. I like structure, so I give you some. I'll talk a little bit about why we did that. Why at Workday, as a technology vendor, why do we care about equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and why do we think right now is the right moment to talk about that? You are here, so you seem to agree. That's good. And then we're going to actually look at the insights that come from this research that I will introduce with a South African lens to it. And then we'll hear more from Busisiwe about the transformation, diversity, and inclusion journey at Absa. So that will unpack it all, put it in context, and then we'll talk about it. And that will include questions and input from you, of course. So why now? Why at Workday did we think, hey, we need to think about diversity and inclusion? Actually, I personally think, and so do we believe at Workday, that we are at a now or never moment for diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity. Partly because there's massive societal change at a global scale. So we have a bit of an international collaboration today, and I've been happy to work with colleagues all over the world on that. And wherever we look, there's been massive global movements, certainly with a spark from Black Lives Matter, but also I think the pandemic has shed a light on other areas, such as mental and physical well-being. I think for the first time, no matter where we looked, it became clear that we needed to care for the physical well-being of our employees, but also have good discussions about mental well-being, as burnout has become sadly such a big thing. So there is a change in how we are ticking as a society and movements that add to it. We are also living in a changing world of work, in where the old uncertainties of how we work together, how I would run a presentation like that, how I communicate and collaborate with my colleagues and my customers and my partners all over the world has been fundamentally shaken up, also even before the pandemic. And it offers a lot of change, positive and negative. It also offers a lot of opportunity. But certainly what we're experiencing is that old uncertainties and the ability to plan ahead have changed, and adaptability is a core skill. That offers us, that puts diversity and inclusion in the workplace in that changed environment of change and rethinking how we all interact with each other. And luckily we have a technology shift. We have more technology, data, insights, and power at our fingertips to actually understand what's going on, to take action, to connect each other, to actually run webinars all over the world, to actually connect all over the world. So the technology shift, the digital transformation helps us in tackling diversity inclusion globally, which really for me makes this a now or never moment. On top of that, the business case for this topic has become so clear. I've been talking about this for probably 20 years now. And I remember when I started in my career, it was a discussion of having to justify the business case for diversity and inclusion over and over again. Why does it matter? Is it just a nice thing to do for some groups? Does it have an impact on innovation and the bottom line of a business? These times have changed a little bit. It has become all over the world a very clear business case, and we have to spend less time defending what we're doing. It has become clear to companies all over the world that this is the right thing to do for their people, but also for their business. And as part of that, the function of DE&I experts has been evolving and professionalizing. So when, if not now, is it time to strategically and systematically move into the future and create workplaces that actually work for all? So that is why I call it a now or never moment. And I'm not the only one at Workday doing that. And in fact, as we talk to our customers, prospects, partners, typically the same challenges and trends emerge. And as Joelle has said in the beginning, they are all intertwined. So from emergency response to the crisis or the crises, to future-proofing your talent with reskilling, making sure you have the right people in the right place in the future, workforce agility, worker support, employee engagement and experience, and diversity and belonging, they belong together. You cannot think employee engagement without thinking of how everybody belongs. And the way we understand diversity and belonging, and you hear me use all these terms quite freely, diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, we actually tend to talk about diversity and belonging at Workday because we believe, and we actually have the data for it, that it matters to not just look at diversity and representation, but to actually go on this transitional journey, on this change journey of building a culture where people belong and can bring their full selves to work. So belonging is what is in the center for us as we talk about the topic. And I said we're living in a changing world of HR. And then I had a very good talk with my colleague Bandile, and you'll hear him later. And he said, is it really human resources that we should be talking about? Or are we in fact moving to a world where we should rethink that? Is it a changing world of human resources, or is it a changing world of human relations that we are trying to shape and that we are trying to make better, so that work works for everyone and so that we can work better together for the goals of the company and for our own individual goals? And that for me is very important. And I do think this human relation aspect stands in the middle of everything that we're doing. And we all know that all over the world, diversity experts, HR leaders, business leaders have been investing in diversity. There's actually a lot of money invested in the topic. So this is a study from McKinsey, I believe, across 15 countries. But we don't see, frankly, I don't see an amazing progress here. If I compare the numbers from 17 to 19, all right, we see a little bit more representation, but it really isn't so great. So why are the outcomes of this hard and important work not matching our intentions? And we've thought about this at Workday, and we believe that it is time to move from tactical, from transitional, to strategic, to systematic, to long-lasting. That is not to say that the work that's being done isn't great, but we see an opportunity to scale it up, to strategize up a little bit. So we're seeing three main reasons around that. I wouldn't even say shortfall, but we're seeing three main areas where we believe we can go from good to great. The first one is from data to insights, and you will hear more about that from the research that we're going to see in a moment. The research does confirm there's a wealth of data for diversity, inclusion, equity in South Africa. In other regions, that is actually more of a problem. So my native country, Germany, when I talk to diversity managers there, they are struggling to get that data in because cultural and also compliance frameworks are so different. So we see a wealth of data in your region. But we also see, even where the data is available, there's a step to make from pure data to insights and deriving wisdom and input for action from it. So how do you use that wealth of data? How do you get from flat data to rich insights that help you steer in the right direction? The second is that I said it before, that the community is working towards a world where we don't just talk about diversity without inclusion or belonging. So going on that transitional journey to shaping a culture towards a culture of inclusion and belonging, not just, but also focusing, of course, on representation. And doing that with a strong people focus, very, very much at the core of everything that we're doing. A very employee-centric, people-focused philosophy almost and foundation, where we focus on people over systems, on people over structures, starting from the analysis, where we really listen to what's going on, where we really focus on employee belonging, employee sentiment, and we see that sentiment data. How are people feeling? How do they feel they belong? Why not take that into that wealth of data and also deal with how people are doing all throughout the employee cycle, taking that into the data as you go on this journey. Truly listen and base your work on that. A people focus, not a system focus throughout. And that is our philosophy almost at Workday. And together with our Chief Diversity Officer, Karen Taylor, who has coined the word VIBE, at Workday, we VIBE. So VIBE stands for value, inclusion, belonging, and equity. Going ahead, as I said, of diversity and focusing on that transition and culture change, where we're not just focusing on giving everybody a seat at the table, but actually invite them to speak and make sure that that voice is being heard, which is belonging then. That is how we tick internally for our own workmates, and of course also how we approach the world when we work with our customers, prospects, and partners. And it does matter to us. It matters to us so much that we actually said we want to learn a little bit more. We are a very global company with very many employees by now, and for our own sake, but also to really learn more for the wider community. We went on this journey and started this research, and Bandile is going to give you the details in a moment. But basically what we did is we wanted to learn more also about regional differences from the US to Europe to Africa to APJ. How are things different? So we focused on EMEA, and that includes data from South Africa. And we queried just in EMEA 2,217 HR diversity and business leaders. And we didn't ask them about, do you think this is important? What is the business case? The business case is clear. There's so much data about it. What we wanted to learn is, what are the drivers for you to do that in your company? How are you approaching it? How are you dealing with insights? What are you doing? Are you taking it seriously? What's the state of the thing, and how are companies approaching it? We had more than 100 voices from South Africa, so a solid basis for the data today. And we did this study in collaboration with the Sapio group and EW group. EW is a group focusing and specializing in diversity and inclusion. So we wanted to make sure that we have a fair and balanced view. So this is what we did. We didn't just ask diversity leaders, but really also business and HR leaders. We wanted to be sure we get the right picture and learn something. So that we did, and it's my pleasure to hand over to Bandile, who will give us all the news from the study and will tell us what it looks like for South Africa. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bandile Jwili. So I will be taking you through today the insights, the research insights specifically for South Africa. So when you look at this first business case, what's a business case for ED&I by country? Right? When you look at these numbers, the highest number in terms of opportunities for improvement, South Africa has the highest numbers in terms of opportunity for improvement. I'm going to look specifically at two of the biggest numbers, which is 68%, where business leaders see that there's a need to attract and recruit a diverse workforce. Right? And the other numbers, that's 64%, where there's a need to develop and promote people from a diverse workforce. So this is from within the organization itself. This is actually followed by by two, which are sitting at 55%, which speak to employee engagement and speak to attracting and developing the actual talent within the organization. Now, if you take a look at these four big numbers that I just mentioned, you'll notice that a lot of these actually speak to, or maybe all of them actually speak to changing what HR actually is, right? So changing the R in HR. When we speak of HR, we used to speak of human resources. As Daniela mentioned earlier, I mean, I tend to speak of human relationships when I speak of HR, and this is quite important to me because I believe that organizations need to stop looking at resources need to stop looking at the transactional things that HR does for the employees within the organization, and start looking at building the relationships, because really that's what we actually we need to be excited about when we're going into an organization. It's what is my relationship with the organization that I'm working for, or I'm working with rather, right? I was also excited when I heard Busisiwe, and in terms of these numbers, I heard Busisiwe mention something that's seemingly small. It may seem seemingly small or seemingly simple, but it's quite powerful what they did in terms of renaming the organization that deals with the human relationships within their organization. So I'm hoping that she will share this herself, because it's truly something that shows that Absa is truly ahead and progressive in when it's speaking about equity, diversity, and inclusion. The next bit of numbers speak to diversity and monitoring the diversity. What is the sentiment in terms of the monitoring within of these diversity numbers, right? This is really where we start when you're talking about the diversity journey, right? And when you speak about looking at that journey, we start by getting the numbers and understanding what is happening within our organizations, right? Now, what these numbers basically say, in terms of from a South Africa perspective, except for in the areas of age and sexuality, you'll notice that South African leaders believe that they are far ahead of the other EMEA countries, right? And in South Africa, this may largely have to do with the fact that we have to do a lot of triple BE reporting, for instance, right? So we already meet the step one of this diversity and inclusion journey. Right. So that's the start of it. So we're actually doing quite well in terms of reporting, and business leaders do believe that we are doing well as South African companies in reporting on diversity and inclusion. But that's really just step one, right? And this speaks to the aggregate roll-up. If you look at these numbers and really try to understand what do these numbers actually mean, we're speaking about the aggregate roll-up when you speak about how many females do you have in particular position, how many Black females do you have in particular position in management roles, for instance, right? When you start thinking about, consider the intersection of groups, right? So when you think, when I'm talking about intersection groups, I'm talking about more than just the actual numbers, right? More than just Black females in a particular space. What is the experience of those Black females? What is the experience of the Black males? What is the experience of white males, or the experience of Black females or Indian males? What are the actual experiences that lead up to them being who they are in the organization and lead them feeling a particular way? So basically trying to get an understanding of the employee sentiments in relation to equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm going to use a very personal example in this, to speak about intersection groups, right? I have a 7.5-year-old daughter, as she'd like to say to me, and we were actually talking the other day about there's something a particular question she asked me, and I can't remember exactly what she asked me, but I thought back to how I would have actually found that answer. And I'm about to give away my age, but back in the day we had the World Book Encyclopedia. That was my place to actually search for information, right? At the end of the conversation, my daughter basically says to me, "Daddy, why don't you just Google it?" This is a lived experience for her, right? And now we've got to start thinking about this lived experience for her. And the reason why I'm using her as an example is because we think about, when we think about diversity, inclusion, and equity, we think about building our organizations for people like our children, for our daughters, for our sons, right? That's who we're building these organizations for. And we want them to come into a space where there's equity, there's diversity, and there's inclusion. But we still have to consider their lived experiences, right? Their experience is not like ours, where some of us have had to use the World Book Encyclopedia, for instance, as a reference. They can easily go in 2 minutes to get the answer from Google, right? So this is what I talk about when we speak about intersection groups. So there is definitely a slide missing here. Ooh, apologies, there seems to be a slide missing here. All right. So what the slide that was missing is basically talking about where are we from a country perspective. So South Africa is slightly ahead in comparison to the rest of EMEA, but is this enough? All right. If we look at the numbers in terms of the approach, there's a poll that was run earlier on, and I'd invite Joel maybe to give us the results of that particular poll. And it was asking this, the question of our strategic approach is a priority to us, and that was sitting at around 28%, and the fact that are we making good progress in relation to our strategic approach, that was sitting at 29% based on our polls. So we see those numbers being slightly different. You know, some may actually be higher amongst this particular group. And we need to now start looking at how do we increase these numbers? How do we improve on these particular numbers within the organization? And I think it will be a great idea for Busisiwe to then speak to us about how Absa has actually engaged in making sure that these numbers are slowly but surely increasing. I'll hand it back to Joe to introduce Busisiwe.
Very much, Bandile, and I've also shared the poll results with the attendees, and very similar. So then as what came out of the research. So that's probably something that we can tackle a little bit later when we have a bit of a panel discussion. So before I hand over to Busisiwe, I really just want to also encourage everyone to use the chat for questions and comments. It's a very pertinent topic for us. But I think Busisiwe, sort of having seen the data that Daniela and Bandile have spoken about, and from your Absa perspective, I'm really curious what your response is, and if you can take us through some of your strategic initiatives.
Thank you so much, Joel, and thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful session. And good morning to all the colleagues on the line, or good afternoon, depending wherever you're joining from. So I would actually like to start just taking a step back in terms of the business case that Daniela has shared earlier on, in terms of the business case for ED&I, and I'm going to refer to TD&I. That is the language that we use in the Absa space, which stands for Transformation, Diversity, and Inclusion. So forgive me if I don't use ED&I a lot. And I would like to actually say that I agree with you in terms of, I agree with the study rather, in terms of the elements that have been mentioned. And also around the areas that you have identified as the business case for transformation, diversity, and inclusion, or equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I would like to add one more, which I think is very critical in terms of really saying why do we do what we do? As transformation, diversity, and inclusion practitioners, as businesses, and that is sustainability of the business. I know there you have mentioned, the positive contribution to the success of the business, but I would like to actually differentiate the two, because the sustainability of the business actually speaks to whether should transformation, diversity, and inclusion, or equity, diversity, and inclusion be removed from the business, will that business survive? That's basically what I'm talking about. And the studies and my experience say that actually, for example, when you look in South Africa, when you look at the economically active population, so let's just take it down in terms of the focus areas that we have, the strategic focus areas that we have as Absa, before I get to them, because that will connect nicely. So our strategic focus areas, we have intentionally decided to focus on 5 elements, which is generational diversity, which says that, how do we ensure that we are taking the young people on this journey of transformation, diversity, and inclusion, but at the same time, including the older generation and not make them to feel like they are useless and they're no longer needed. And then the second one is around gender diversity, where we are saying, how do we ensure that we are balancing in terms of gender, and we are actually allowing women to meaningfully participate in the decision-making of the business, as well as driving that strategy. And then the third one is around people with disability. The fourth one is around the LGBTQA community. And then the last one is around racial as well as ethnic diversity. And we have specifically divided, separated those two, because in some countries, race is still an issue, like in South Africa, where we need to work harder to ensure equity. And in some countries that we are operating in, race is no longer an issue, but ethnicity is actually an issue, where other people from different, ethnic groups are treated differently compared to the others. Now, going back to the sustainability element that I spoke about around the business case, when you look at South African case study, is that 90% of economically active population, which is, the people who are either employed or running their businesses and earning a living, those people are actually Black. And, I won't go deeper into what do I mean Black, what is the definition of Black. We differentiate it according to, different race groups. And then when you look at that 90% and you take it down to your business and start to think about it and say, if 90% of the people who are actually earning a living are Black people, how do we look like as a company? Are we actually are we actually in line with what the economically active population for the country look like? And take it further and say, how do we actually, if we are okay in terms of diversity, how do we then create opportunities and moments for our colleagues' voices to be heard in the boardrooms where they are making where the decisions are made? And then you take it the other way around and actually say, if we are not diverse enough, how does that affect our efforts to be able to attract the customers that are actually speaking to the economically active population? So in other words, a simple example is that on that table where the decisions are made, if, for example, there are no women and you have got products which are supposed to be attracting women, you might actually be selling, the potential customers or even your customers, you might be actually selling them wrong products because you don't have the voices of the women on that table that are actually saying, hang on, that is not speaking to women. Or hang on, that is not speaking to, to young people. So that's what I mean when I'm saying sustainability, because the minute we start to understand that this is beyond just ticking the box, this is beyond just, diversity or having enough young people in the company or enough women in the company, but it's about involving and including them in those decision-making where the products are actually developed, where the products are actually elevated to, to go out there and bring us money. Then we will not be able to benefit from the transformation, diversity, and inclusion efforts. And in turn, we will continue to lose customers and we will continue to not attract the customers. And I mean, you have mentioned other things which are really absolutely spot on to say, are you able to attract talent? Are you able to retain talent as well? And that's all about whether, once they have landed, you are actually creating an environment that is enabling for them to meaningfully contribute to your strategy and therefore contribute to the success of the company. So definitely for me, it's critical for each and every one of us to understand that if we can say we are removing transformation, diversity, and inclusion in businesses, we will miss out as companies. And therefore, at the end of the day, we will not be successful because, the times have changed now. In the past, during the apartheid era or during the slavery era, people were offering their services, their labor, whether you're paying them or you're not paying them, unwillingly so. But right now, people have got their rights. People know what is their right. People have got the right to actually choose whether we come and we work for you or we don't. People have got the right to actually, make their own research before they even come, especially leaders, and say, what is the culture? If you are actually saying you're headhunting me and you say I must come and join your company, I want to know about your culture. I want to know whether I'm going to be heard. I want to know whether I'm going to just be a token or I'm going to actually play a meaningful role in driving the business strategy. And that for me is critical. And I guess, I will unpack our approach as we go. Let me not, give everything in one go, but let's engage and then I will unpack our approach as Absa. But one thing that I can mention is that we have intentionally decided to move from the transactional approach to the transformational approach and actually look at the whole agenda from the employee life cycle holistically, from the time before people even join the company to the time they exit. So in each and every touch point of the employee life cycle, we definitely ensure that, transformation, diversity, and inclusion is part of our DNA. And yes, you are very right, Bandile. At Absa, we're not talking of human resources, but we are talking of people and culture, because we have taken cognizance of the fact that, it's beyond the resources, it's relational, it's transformational, it's all those wonderful things together. So let me pause there.
Thanks so much, Busisiwe. And to really zoom in on that why question, right? Why does this matter? And I think in a sense, you're also making a really good boardroom case, because you can't really walk into the boardroom and say it's the right thing to do. Or governance, because those things matter, but eventually what matters is the business case, right? And that's what you're making. But we've gotten Dulamini in the chat here asking, and I think he's sort of almost a little bit hesitant to believe you, because he says, as clear as the business case is, business leaders are still not really champions of diversity and inclusion, and this is obviously your daily job, Busisiwe, to make a convincing argument there. So, how do we change this? Do you have some ideas of the business leaders that don't see this picture yet, as we do here in this webinar? What we can say or do to convince them?
I think, Joel, it starts with leaders understanding the real business case for this. Because if you say, you've said it right now, that you cannot go to the boardroom and say it's the right thing to do. They'll roll their eyes like, okay, so what? So it is important that as people who are champions of the agenda, we clearly articulate and demonstrate the business case. And by how we do that is that we need to be able to prove, we need to be able to show. And that takes me to the next step of actually the how part in terms of, technology as well as data and all that. Because one thing for sure, I can stand here and say, oh, we will not survive tomorrow if we don't do this. But then if you actually bring in, even if it's not about your specific company, but you're able to demonstrate, the harm or the risks that are associated with not doing this, then you will be able to win some. And then you'll still have others that you have not won, right? And some of the things that make the other group not to be won is the fact that, as human beings, the nature is that we want to protect ourselves, we want to protect our jobs, and sometimes that cloud our judgment in a sense that, you look at yourself and you say, I'm male, and now they want me to be, to embrace diversity by bringing more females. What does that mean for me? What does that mean for my son? Will I be here tomorrow? Will I have an opportunity? My son, will he have an opportunity? And the reality is that if we can actually, look at a bigger picture rather than narrowly where we are only concerned about preserving ourselves, we can actually see more benefits. Because, if you look at people who are actually more self-preserving, what they need and the how part, and I'm not saying that at Absa we have won the battle or we have, we have made it. We are still on a journey, and hence, on that slide, Daniela said, write the journey, because we are on a journey. We continuously improve. And one of the things that, I have used in the past in other organizations, and we are also starting to use now at Absa, is focusing on the inclusion part of things. The diversity, yes, we are already doing it. A lot of companies are doing it. We've got targets, in South Africa, and even also in other countries, by the way, there is targets where the legislation is saying you need to have young people, you need to have Black people, you need to have the women and the like. That's the diversity part. The inclusion part, the mistake that a lot of us transformation, diversity, inclusion practitioners, as well as the people and culture or human resources or human relations practitioners that we make, is that we forget the fact that when you are including others, there is a risk of excluding others. So you need to be intentional about how do you ensure that when you are bringing more and you're saying we have to be equitable for us to be equal. We have to create opportunities, equity opportunities, so that we can, at the end, be an equal community, right? But at the same time, you need to be able to work harder on ensuring that the older generation, as I mentioned earlier on, for example, are not feeling like they're useless. What they've learned in the past is no longer relevant. You need to have a strategy for inclusion, which will then make an older person to feel like, oh, wow. So the younger people actually value the institutional memory that I have and I have gained over the years. And, through diversity and inclusion programs such as mentoring or mentorship, as well as coaching, you then bring in those older generations so that they can transfer the knowledge, but at the same time, have a sense of that purpose to say, I am actually contributing to my strategy as a company. I'm not just, kicked because I'm older. I'm not just kicked because I've been with the company for too long, but actually me being here for too long, it's useful to the company. So it is important to focus and have an intentional strategy on the inclusion part. And that's where a lot of companies fail, because we focus a lot on the numbers, we focus a lot on saying, do we have enough this? Do we have enough women? Do we have, but then we don't translate that into the inclusion part. And then the bigger part is belonging, which is, what you were talking about, Daniela, to say, I can say, look, I have made you an MD, or I've made you head of whatever, and I have given you the authority and the powers to make decisions. However, do you feel like you belong? Do you feel like you actually are home here at, Absa or workplace or wherever? And that's one element that is not easy to deal with, because it has to do with culture. So you have to work with the culture deeply and ensure that you are addressing all those cultural issues that has been there for many, many years, and you're trying now to change and ensure that everybody feel like they belong. I know I took long to answer, but I'm hoping that I've helped.
I think
I
Daniela
kept
wants
nodding
to
all along. I
chip
want to
in.
say something. I could not agree more, because I think you answered that question, not just looking to how leadership can be convinced, but how you can convince the hearts and minds and hands of everybody in the company. And I actually have a data point for that, because that's why I'm here bringing the data in. We had one question in the research that said, what do you need, to all the companies that participate, what do you need to bring this important work to the next level? What is that thing that you need to make it better? And a third of people said, well, I need leadership commitment, executive commitment. And that is not surprising, right? Everybody always says that. I want money, commitment, people, all the good stuff. But another third, and that is a global EMEA data, another third said, so almost as many people said, I need staff buy-in. We cannot go on this journey without having, of course, leadership buy-in, And we need to be able to go to the boardroom and really make that case of this is not just a numbers game. This is making your company future-proof in terms of bottom line innovation. But we also need the employees to be with us on this journey. We need to continuously convince them, because this work is not going to happen just with people like Busisiwe and the board. Sorry, Busisiwe, it's not. You need everybody on this journey. And then you can show successes, and where inclusion comes in and the voices of everybody become louder, that is where then you can show successes. And as a technology company, for us, that's innovation. We are building technology. We want to build technology that is, new, unique, and brings to the world something that we haven't had before. We can only do that if everybody can be creative and if everybody can bring their unique own experiences, as a young person, as an old person, as a man, as a woman. So for us, that is what is our spark to innovation. And I found it really, really interesting to see that and to hear from you, Busisiwe, that the belonging, feeling, and sentiment is so important. And that for me is also a big message to really take that seriously and not just look at the hard numbers of quotas and representation, but actually to start looking at, do we have data? You can measure that. Do we have data about how our people are feeling right after we recruit them, how they are feeling after promotion, how they are feeling, in phase X of the pandemic versus phase Y of the pandemic, and how this differs maybe for different groups of employees. You can actually have that data, measure it confidentially, and use it to inform your decisions as much as you use hard data and representation.
I think yeah, definitely. I think one of the key things for me in answering the question, and Lucia is quite correct. We've got the diversity numbers, guys. I think we've got the metrics. The metrics are great. That's the start of it. As I mentioned earlier, that's step one of the journey, right? It's the inclusion now that's quite important. And in order to drive that from the top, I think we need to speak to our leaders to actually be part of that, and actually be part of developing that inclusion aspect of it. Right. If you've got that, that's how you're going to get buy-in from leaders. That's what I've seen in terms of successes and how we get buy-in from leaders, getting the leaders involved in developing those strategies, those inclusion strategies, so that they understand that there is benefit to them as leaders as well. Right. If a leader has certain metrics to meet, for instance, right, and it benefits them from a bonus perspective, right. That's one thing, but when we talk about how it benefits them building their business, it's quite a different conversation to have, right? That I think is going to speak more to their minds than their pockets. And the key thing is speaking to their hearts, right? Get top down. Look at the top down approach versus the bottom up approach. The bottom up approach, you're dictating to the top level and saying, hey, this is what we want to do. Do you agree with it? Let's look at it from a top-down approach and say, let's sit down and develop this inclusion part of the strategy. We've got the diversity, we've got the numbers, we've got the systems that tell us the numbers. We just need you to tell us how are you going to get involved in this inclusion part of it. Right?
Probably maybe just to zoom in on technology quickly, if I because it may be apparently is not so closely related to the topic that we're talking about, but if I ask Bandile and Daniela, they'll probably say it is because they work for a technology company. So let me ask Busisiwe first, and because I'd also like to hear a tiny bit more about Vibe later, because that sounds super interesting. But Busisiwe, where in this topic, like the driving of the inclusion, the driving of the diversity, the not only focusing on the numbers, where does technology come in the picture then?
Technology is really, really, making things exciting for me and for us at Absa. And one of the things that I must mention that has to do with Workday is that, some of the programs that we drive from transformation, diversity, and inclusion, we actually, drive them through Workday. For example, we have got the mentorship program that our relationship between a mentor and a mentee actually start on Workday. Where somebody who's looking for a mentor just go to Workday and then look at the number of the people that have signed up as mentors, and actually be able to ask for a meeting, or ask a request to be a mentee to that specific person. So that's just one of the examples of how technology is actually making things easier. Because remember, in terms of the mentorship program, a lot of times the mentors are senior people, and it's a bit difficult for the junior people to actually approach, or have the guts to write an email to somebody who's at a much higher level and say, oh, I think I've looked at your work and I want to learn from you. It's difficult. But now that we have got this on Workday, it's easier, because already the people that have signed up as mentors are already saying, hey, I'm here. Tell me if you would like me to be your mentor. So it makes it much, much easier. So that's one of the simple examples of how technology actually enable the work that we're doing from transformation, diversity, and inclusion. But then the other things are simple things really that might be simple when you look at them or when you hear about them in relation to technology. But when you look at our gender diversity and inclusion program, one of the things that we look at is in terms of the infrastructure for women, for them to be able to perform optimally wherever they are. And now with technology, women are able to be on their phones, while they are actually on their way to collect the children, without feeling guilty that, oh my goodness, now I'm missing a meeting. So that is just, one of the simple things that are happening. And I'm sure a lot of companies are enjoying that in terms of, now everybody forced to do things online. But that's just one of the things that actually show that once you actually start embracing diversity and inclusion fully, and allow people who are coming, whether it's from, being a mother, or being a married person, or being a single person who does not have, a partner to collect the children, people are now bringing their best, because they're not worried about they have to be here at this place while the children is waiting in an aftercare facility, and they're able to bring their whole, because now they are fulfilled mothers, they're able to please their children and take care of their children's needs at the same time while they're delivering, and actually delivering more than they used to even before this online thing. And then the other thing as well, that I found it valuable recently, is in terms of data. So we have embarked on an assessment. So on an ongoing basis, we look at ourselves, hold up the mirror to see where we are, to see whether we are on the right track, to see whether we have regressed in some areas. And then we actually bring new solutions on an ongoing basis. It's continuous improvement. As I said, is a journey. So I must say that we found the data valuable in terms of the assessment that we were doing. And when I'm talking about data, I'm talking about the data that sometimes you can actually not think that is part of diversity and inclusion. When we did the analysis, when we looked at our data, one of the things that really came out quite strongly was Turner, to say, people who are with the company longer, they tend to, do this. People who are with the company for a shorter for a shorter period of time, they tend to, I was not even aware that my lights were off. My goodness, this load shedding thing. So Turner was one of those things, because normally when you look at the data, you would look at gender, right? Those are the normal things: gender, race, disability. But then things like, how long have the people been with the company? And what does that impact on the other elements of transformation? And an example is, in some areas where you see perhaps where you see, and it's an example, and I don't want to obviously share too much information that is confidential to Absa, but just to give an example of something that is coming on top of my head. So if, for example, we're saying young people come to the company and leave the company quicker because data is showing us is because maybe they're not energized enough, or maybe they are not included enough, whatever, right? So that turner is actually impacting on representation because people come in quickly and leave quickly. And then at the same time, it also contributes to the institutional memory. People come in quickly and leave quickly, and therefore don't have time to actually, know the business better. Or even people come in and leave quickly before they even benefit from some of the programs that we have, or even because somebody is coming in and leaving quickly, she or he leaves quickly before she can reach the optimal performance. So that also affects performance, because obviously if you're new, you will not, fully understand business and fully perform like somebody who has been with the company for 20 years. So that turner alone is one of those data points that we normally wouldn't look at from transformation, diversity, inclusion. And it came out quite strongly. And I thought, wow, this is one thing that I'm sure a lot of companies ignore. They look at the obvious things. And then the insights that then come out of that data also contribute to, continuous improvement, and as well as closing the gaps that we're having, as well as helping us to actually manage the risks that we're having. And that turner as well, because it's one of the example that I'm giving, also then show that, for example, if males stay longer in the company, they then have an added advantage compared to the females who don't stay longer, because then they understand business better. And over the years, with the remuneration, they have, earned more. And then, so definitely the data points that we got from technology, because, we couldn't have been able to do that manually. It's definitely helping us, and we are privileged that we are able to move positively on our journey because of it.
Thank you so much, Busisiwe. An hour flies by when you're having a rich conversation like this, but I think it's been really amazing. I just want to get some last thoughts because we obviously do want to respect the time of all our participants who have come in big droves here. For the past hour, but maybe just Bandile and Daniela, some last thoughts or conclusions from your side.
Oh, so much more to say. 3 minutes to go. My first thought is what you said, Busisiwe, really resonated with me, because for me it showed what I said in the beginning, that now or never moment. We have an opportunity here. If we look beyond the obvious, if we look a step further, if we maybe look into intersections of how, people don't just come to work or to life with one characteristic. I'm a woman, or I'm white, or what have you, or I'm young, or I'm old, or I have a disability. It all comes together for us. So that's another way to look beyond the obvious, and look at intersections and how our experience in the world and our opportunities can be managed. So I really like that idea of looking beyond the obvious, and everything that you said when you talked about technology was really about insights, but so much more about connections. And I really think, as we continue to talk about this topic, if we continue to focus on what connects us, also globally, and if we continue to learn from each other and the things that are going on everywhere else in the world, we can actually, I think, progress much faster on this journey, which sometimes is slow. So yeah, I wish we would learn more from each other. And I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Daniela. Bandile, your number last.
I think from my side, I think best thing I can say from, just advice I can give everyone, just think human relationships, not resources. It's quite important. And in that, don't just look at diversity. Diversity is your numbers. The inclusion and belonging are your actual people. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with the relationship with people in your organization. Think of those people. Those are the people that are actually helping your business thrive. So think human relationships, not human resources.
Fantastic. A whole hour about a super important topic without approaching it from a compliance angle. And I think it's been really great. So I'm going to thank you again, Daniela, Bandile, and Busisiwe, for your enthusiasm, insights, and everything. Thanks to Workday for making these things possible. And we really need a sequel here. So let me chat to all of you and see when we can get online again in the next year. But thanks everyone who attended over the last hour. Thanks for your comments and questions, and I hope to see you all soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone.